CCH Tagetik Budgeting, Planning, and Forecasting provides FP&A teams with the functionality needed to confidently create cohesive plans at the group and business unit levels. Spend more time acting on plans and less time managing planning data. CCH Tagetik accelerates planning cycles by using AI automation to augment data integration, validation, calculations, and reporting. See the big enterprise picture and business unit specifics. Create plans based on centralized financial and operational data and give analysts the power to explore data at any level via AI-driven workflows. Core planning and scenario analysis in our solution is simple. The intelligent planning platform offers both iterative and ad hoc modeling, scenario planning tools, predictive analytics, forecasting templates, and pre-built calculations. Set FP&A up for long-term success.
Hello, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Melanie Nerona. I'm a principal of policy and insights at Economist Impact, and I'm pleased to welcome you and have all of you join us here today. Now, this webinar is called Future-Proofing Financial Leadership, Planning for the Unknown. It's programmed by Economist Impact and supported by Wolters Kluwer. Now, in an era where volatility has really become the norm, finance leaders cannot just respond to this environment. They really need to stay ahead. And what sets firms apart is their ability to turn this uncertainty into an advantage. And that requires better planning, it requires clear analysis, and even tools to enhance human judgment. Now, in this session, we'll move past that usual rhetoric of just disruption and dig into how finance leaders are turning that complexity into an advantage. And to join me in the discussion, I am pleased to welcome my panelists here today. We have Alex Hermes, Solutions Director, Northern Europe at Wolters Kluwer, CCH Tagetik. Matthew Pierce, Chief Financial Officer of Commercial Banking at HSBC. Johan Olsen, Head of Commercial Finance at Volvo Cars. Sidra Iqbal, Global Finance Transformation Director at Danone. Thank you so much to my panelists for joining me here today, and I'm really excited to get into this discussion. And so to set the scene, Johan, I'd love to turn to you first. Could you share your views on the current operating environment, the volatility we're seeing? What are some of the most pressing risks that you're facing?
Thank you, Melanie, and delighted to be on this panel and looking forward to this discussion. Planning for the unknown, it's the million-dollar question, isn't it? So and that's what we're trying to do. I mean, at the moment, it is an extremely volatile world, as everyone knows. I mean, we're very well aware of everything going on in terms of geopolitics, tariffs, and also very changing consumer demands alongside many industries. And in my industry, in automotive in particular, we have a kind of a perfect storm, if you will, if I take it back to our industry, with consumer demands shifting, where we thought electrification were coming a bit faster than now has proven to be the case. We have multiple technologies that we then need to invest in. And then we also have investments in our industry that are, of course, very, very heavy from an industrial point of view, that then also get impacted by changing tariffs, where you thought a certain production of a component or a vehicle was under a free trade agreement. It no longer is. So that is changing things quite a lot. And on top of that, you've had the inflation and all the other disruptions with supply chains that we have seen recently. So it is quite an interesting time right now, but you know, it makes the world of finance people challenging and fun as well. So you know, we're embracing the challenge as well.
That's a great attitude to see, Johan. And certainly it has been challenging. And surely a lot of these issues keep you up at night. Matthew, I'd like to get your perspective. You're coming from the financial services industry. What are some of the most pressing risks in your domain?
Well, it's been over a fairly short period of time, it feels, if we cast our minds back here in the UK. We've sort of had 5 prime ministers and 7 chancellors in a relatively short time in British history. So I think, the economic and fiscal and political environment continues to be challenging. That political environment extends to geopolitical environment across the world. And, we're quite a big player in the international connectivity space, be it through cross-border trade finance, foreign exchange, etc. So, the UK still sits across a number of important trade corridors in the world. So the UK economy gets to see that. We also have regulations and laws impacting our sector that are coming in, and some quite meaty ones. So being able to handle those, how to navigate its impact on our customers as we continue to support them. The competitive environment continues to be challenging. Usually, banking in the past had a sort of high barrier to entry, but feels less so more and more. And you have a lot of disintermediation of non-traditional players in certain spaces. So if I think about the payments industry, for example, there's a lot of threat of disintermediation and other players that can come into this space who are not normally, and they don't have banking licenses yet. They can pick off, some of these areas. I would also talk about kind of crime and bad actors. We sit at a sort of core piece of looking at, be it people trying to breach tax laws, defraud our customers, breach sanctions laws, or be part of, financial crime. These continue to be very real challenges, and similar to competitors getting better, these bad actors also get better and better. So that continues to be a high kind of standard that we have to continue to meet. And more and more climate is coming onto the agenda, the impact of climate on our customers, on the economy, therefore, and how we will adapt to that environment. Stress testing we particularly have to do in this space. And I suppose as we get on to maybe topics like AI and things like that later on that are sort of new and unknown, trying to look out over the next 30 years plus and trying to predict what's going to happen in the environment space is very challenging to do. Thank you.
Matthew, that's certainly a really long list of risks that you're looking at too. And Sidra, I want to ask you, I'm sure you face the same number of risks on a day-to-day basis. How do you then decide which ones are high impact and which ones will have a low impact on your business? How do you sift through all of it?
Absolutely, Melanie, and thank you for this very future relevant discussion. Indeed, there is a plethora of risks, and the number and the magnitude changes every now and then. So, you not only have to tackle with how many risks there are, you have to tackle with how they change in the gambit of your business in terms of impact. And what we do at Danone is that we have a very clear and robust way of governing risk evaluation. And of course, that means that you need to constantly measure the likelihood and the magnitude of the negative impacts. You have to always check constant vigilance on materiality. And of course, this is high on the agenda of our executive team. And I think beyond just, having a robust governance framework, it is also needed to be embedded in the culture of the organization. And culturally speaking, if I turn to Danone, we look at constructive dissatisfaction with what we know today and what we can do better. And knowing this culture of performance, which ensures that we are continuously improving and proactively becoming future proof, it helps you being ready for the new challenges, being current relevant and future relevant even in volatile times. And also another way to evaluate risk while you have a robust risk dedicated governance scheme is also to always have an eye on your portfolio So, how is your portfolio doing? Regular pruning of the parts of the portfolio which is underperforming, leveraging and bringing up the part of the portfolio that's growing at scale, and then also very disciplined capital allocation behind this agenda. So this is how I see is let's say an overview of how you tackle risks and then put them to action.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for setting the scene on risk evaluation and the approach to it. And I really want to unpack that over the course of this conversation. But as we round up this assessment and review of the uncertain environment we're facing, Alex, I want to ask you, there's so many risks out there, but what's the risk of inaction in these times of uncertainty? How can leaders avoid it?
Yeah, so I think Matthew and Sidra have already outlined quite nicely what risks there might be posing just through new market entrants. I think the real risk that comes from that is for organizations to have like missed opportunities to maybe innovate, and that in different sectors that innovation can look differently. That of course can also lead in maybe a loss in market share, or not being able to capture that market share as intended. And of course, also that inaction can also lead to inoptimal allocation of resources. So whilst you might have resources that you can deploy, you aren't doing that in an optimal way, and again, risk falling behind the competition there. And I think once this process starts rolling, that can then also potentially lead to like a organizational paralysis, where then maybe these unallocated resources, maybe also in the form of HR talent, is not being utilized in the best potential way. Of course, these are all in activities which pose a big risk. And the way that we see at Wolters Kluwer that this can be mitigated is, of course, also with the help of technology. And the starting point, though, before technology comes into play here is really, I think, an innovative mindset, which needs to come from the top, which also enables the organization to adopt technology. And once then technology can be applied in this process, then we can start looking at scenario analysis and stress testing, but also automation. And the ability of performing scenario analysis does then help to see which strategy might be useful, what resource allocation across different markets might be a useful way of doing it. And then again, with the automation, then this competitive advantage can also be exploited by you most efficiently deploying your resources. So I think that's something we're also seeing throughout all the different industries.
Wonderful. I think that's a great segue. And yes, Johan, do you want to comment on something that Alex has said?
Yeah, it's just to your point, Melanie, with the kind of cost of or the risk, what it can kind of impact. I think we can take one example, several examples recently from the UK, where we had cybersecurity attacks, and to not be sufficiently prepared for that, and to not kind of have been able to avoid that. And I feel for the companies that have ended up in that situation, but you have some examples where you can put some very high price tags on it. I mean, most recently, Jaguar Land Rover in the UK have had this production shutdown, and while we don't know the cost of that, it still is a preliminary. I mean, the loan from the UK government is 1.5 billion sterling, so gives you an idea of the magnitude of not being able to deal with some of these risks, and it gets very painful for companies. And I think that's a threat for all of us that we need to be very humble about, and really have plans about it. I'm not saying it's going to be bulletproof, but it's a real risk that has really crept up in terms of likelihood and the kind of massive impact it has in the recent years.
Yeah, thank you, Johan, not just for highlighting cybersecurity, but I think also underlying the cost of two businesses of this inaction, of not staying ahead of some of the threats. And thank you, Alex, for talking to us about some of those tools that businesses use. I'm sure a lot of that will come up in this second phase of our discussion here today, looking a bit closer at how finance leaders are enhancing their planning and budgeting and staying ahead of some of these risks. Now, we can't change the environment, but of course you can minimize the impact of the uncertainty on your business. And that really requires finance leaders to stay responsive. And there's two elements I want to get into here. One is the tools and strategies, but also how do you prepare your team for that agility? So Johan, I'd like to just continue on with what you were saying, but can you give us some examples of the tools and strategies that you think are proving to be most effective while navigating this uncertainty?
Yes, of course. I find it's a super interesting topic, and I mean, I've been with Volvo Cars for 15 years, and we've had a lot of different strategies, approaches. I've also spent quite a lot of time within finance organizations with learning what other companies are doing outside of my industry, and I get a lot of energy from engaging in that. And I think if we go back a number of years ago, maybe 5-7 years ago, a lot of people wanted to stop doing budgeting and only looked at trends, and then some of that got dropped across many businesses because you need that structure. And I think where I'm landing is that you need some kind of in-between approach. I think you need a structure of a business plan. So if I'm going to be very tangible, we do a proper business plan. I mean, once a year, and then we do tangible outlooks on a monthly basis, and sometimes we do more formal outlooks as well. But the point is here, I think you need to sit down and have a great process of actually thinking out what are the risks, what is happening in the macro environment, what does happen if government incentives change, what discount rates needs to be different, what about a tariff comes into place, or so on. So you need to do that work because there's a lot of value in that kind of strategic dialogue in management teams. But then you need to complement that with scenario planning, and I think scenario planning becomes very important in this kind of volatile environment that we've been discussing here. So to be very specific, I think that personally the best way to do it is to not just have everyone come in with scenario planning. I mean, I work for a company that has business. We have operations in 33 countries, and we sell in 90 countries, and we have 43,000 employees. So all the business units cannot come in with many different scenarios. That would be a disaster from a kind of complexity in my team to bring that together. So I think one way of doing it is to have a kind of base plans, work with that bottom up, and then do a lot of scenario planning in the central role. And that I think central teams are very appropriately set out to do, because then you can take the assumptions and you can tweak them. As I mentioned earlier, you can change discount rates. But the market mixes differently? What happens if we have more or less electrified cars in our case? And then you can play around with the parameters that all are grounded and built up with ownership and accountability. And then you apply the scenario on all that data. That I find is quite a powerful way of doing it. And also, if you have a large enterprise with a lot of complexity, it will perhaps drive too much work and too much time if you're going to ask everyone to do complex scenario analysis. So there are different ways of doing it, but that I think can be a good way to divide the kind of planning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think that's such a structured way of looking at it and really valuable insight for our audience here. Sidra, I'd like to get your thoughts as well on tools and strategies that have been most effective.
Yes, absolutely, Melanie. Happy to compliment. So the strategies that we look are a lot centered towards scenario planning and dynamic forecasting, because now we realize that static forecasting is not relevant anymore and doesn't speak to the risks that we were talking of earlier. So it's really important to use as much as possible future-proof methods like AI, machine learning for real-time demand forecasting, and then using that to plug it into cost models. For example, in Danone, in operations realm, we have 500 real-time cost models that are dynamic enough via machine learning to be able to give a right sense of how our margins will evolve. We also have, and under having the tools, you also need to have the right framework to leverage. And for us, the framework is focused on customer, cost, cash, and carbon. These are the four levers that we use, and this is how we play with the scenarios and we see what are the right growth spaces for us. And the other thing that we need to take care of, and it applies to a lot of purpose-driven organizations like Danone, is you need to keep an eye and check on the pulse of the short and the medium term, and this is what scenario planning and dynamic forecasting does. But you need to make sure that you have the long term deliverables, KPI, sustainability, carbon neutrality also embedded into this process, so it's not on the side, it's embedded into all the framework of performance evaluation that you need to do.
Excellent. I certainly think that scenario planning is maybe one of the most effective approaches. It's something I've heard from finance leaders over and over again. Matthew, is there anything that you're doing differently, or would you like to reiterate the scenario planning perspective?
Probably, I'm going to say much the same because everyone's doing scenario planning, which is important. Work for an organization that's 160 years old with a rich history. And if I think about when I joined, maybe some 21 years ago, the financial analysis was like a history lesson, very backward looking. I can't remember when it was, but we have definitely moved full tilt that the primary piece of analysis is forward looking. Regular forecasting, the annual planning cycle. Working in the bank, we do a lot of stress testing, multiple stress tests every year that take different scenarios, plausible scenarios, some implausible. How do you break the organization? Reverse stress testing scenarios. So you have many, many different scenarios. And I think what's important with the projection forward, the forecast, is how does it actually inform decision making. So whilst we can all sit as finance people and run beautiful models that have very clear assumptions and lovely correlation factors, it's actually how do you use the information. And I think that's the most important thing now, is where does that feature with the key decision makers? How geared are they in terms of where they focus their time about what this forward looking scenario says, and where are the discussions in the organizations and the decisions made to use that information to do something differently if you either don't like what it's telling you, or if you really like what it's telling you and you want to do more of it and ensure it happens. I think it's taking that great piece of financial analysis that I'm sure myself and all my colleagues here do, and actually translating it into sort of very well-informed decision making.
That's an excellent point as well, just because you can have so many different scenarios, but how do you act on it? So thank you for raising that point. Alex, I want to ask you, with all of these scenarios, stress testing, and so on, you need a whole host of data. You need robust data underpinning all of that. What are your views on, how data analytics is helping finance leaders?
Yeah, so I think the points that were made by the other speakers really resonate what I'm seeing. So obviously the scenario planning is the tool that's needed to not just take a bottom-up plan, but to flex that with top-down assumptions and just look at different possible outcomes. And I think we're really talking about getting the basics in place here. And of course, there's also technology required that underpins this. And a big component, which you've also touched on, is to be able to ingest these results. So to have good technology, good dashboards, which help you to also analyze these insights and then to take actions from these. But something that I'm also seeing now, and also something we've started mentioning, is how AI can help with that. So when it comes to AI around insights, as you've alluded to, lots of external and internal data is required. So there can be all sorts of internal drivers, like mortgage rates that have been provided, or it could be external drivers like CPI. And in order to hold all this data and ingest this data, you need technology that supports with that. And once that's in place, different sorts of technologies such as AI anomaly detection could be leveraged to make sure before we go into any predictive forecasting that the data that we're using, the actuals that we're using, are correct. And other side effect of that is as well, it kind of can start help us understand patterns in our data, which we can then maybe use when looking forward. And once we've then got all this data and we use AI and machine learning models, we can start to understand which drivers have been maybe driving our historic performance. And then once these models are trained, we can also use them to start predicting the future. And it's something where within my organization, we're not seeing this as a big bang where we just want a predictive forecast to be generated, but also have this bridge with more driver-based approaches and scenario modeling where organizations can understand these insights and deploy them in more traditional models. And then maybe in next phases, then also when the trust is established, then use these models. I think just one or two examples I've seen in my customer base is in the banking industry, where such machine learning models have been used to predict cash net inflows and maybe any shortfalls there, or within the utilities sector, where this technology can also be used to predict the energy consumption and then identify again that resource allocation from where to source energy at optimal cost.
Those are excellent examples, Alex. And again, a nice segue to what I wanted to ask Johan about next in terms of the most high impact use cases for AI in the finance function. Johan, could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, I think it is. I think we have to divide it into two things in my opinion. First of all, we have the kind of large language models and the if you will, personal productivity gains. But in some ways, I don't like calling it that because it makes it very small. And in fact, it could be a very, very large impact. So integrating Copilot into the kind of platform which we have done, and that happens to be one product, but you can have and any other, of course. But to have that integrated directly, so it can see your files, can see your data, it's a bit of a game changer. Because then you can help with analysis, you can help with creation of models, as well as all of the other strengths of a chat AI function of a large language model. Now, I think the impact of that we have only seen the beginning of, and we can already see the impact, but it's going to be more, and we're scratching the surface. Then we have specific cases, kind of like the ones Alex mentioned, are great, and we have those examples as well, where you have kind of claims analysis on AI in various forms, and they can be extremely powerful as well. Other examples will be automations and machine learning of special kind of very specific invoicing flows and invoicing structures that we use. That just is helping a lot with man hours. But we shouldn't underestimate how important that is, because I bet you so many finance teams out there can relate to the fact that a lot of people feel bogged down by manual processes, by things that needs to be done on anything from controlling to accounting and so on. And if we can free up that time, we make room for the true kind of business partnering. And that connects to Matthew's point. How do we actually make a difference? And we make a difference by being at the table in the boardrooms where the decisions are made, to kind of have that outside in mentality as finance people, as well as the inside knowledge of the data. And if we spend too much time on just creating data, creating reports and so on, we're not going to be able to fully step into those shoes to be that true business partner. I see the CFO role becoming more like a COO role, in my opinion. That's where things are heading for finance, in my personal opinion. So where I'm getting with this is, let's not underestimate the personal productivity, and let's not underestimate the taking away of mundane tasks that AI and machine learning does, because that's super powerful. I still believe in that really complex planning in multi-market, multi-sales channels, multi-product mixes. The craftsmanship of a really experienced FP&A finance person, business controller, call it what you want, is extremely powerful with that kind of experience and the feeling for the numbers as well. So So there are many cases in AI, but it's not only limited to the kind of solve it all solutions, I think.
That's very interesting. I'm seeing a lot of discussion now on whether we should just focus on, primarily focus on those efficiency gains, but what about value creation through AI? So I like what you're saying. Don't underestimate the value of the productivity gains as well. Sidra, I saw you raise your hand. Do you want to comment?
Yes, absolutely. I think what Johan is referring to is indeed very visible, and we are starting to be on that learning curve. And I wanted to complement by adding that AI also has potential to deliver in different parts of the value chain. So, as an example, where we are starting to look at it, Denon, is how can AI be leveraged to better manage your inventory, and that means you can really unlock working capital situations, and then by working capital situations you can unlock cash, and it's a big topic right now for many organizations on a growth curve like Denon. The other part, and if we move further into the start of the value chain towards the customer, another element that we are stress testing as a use case is dynamic pricing and margin management, because once you have good AI leverageability in the operations, how do you unlock pricing using that in a very real time and let's say regenerative AI basis? So I think indeed it's on a personal level what you can do for the human capital, but also in terms of unlocking different parts of the value chain. Of course, we are just at the beginning of this curve, and we will see a lot of value. But I think many places where we can already see areas of taking this innovation through.
Absolutely. And Sidra, I want you to continue and build on that a little bit. When we spoke earlier, you talked a lot about creating that enabling environment for technology adoption. It's not just about the technologies. You need to have the skills in place, you need to have the cultural mindset. Could you elaborate on some of that?
Absolutely. So I think it all starts with the people, and you need to have your workforce, your people, digitally and analytically upskilled. So you need to be digitally aware, but also how to leverage it analytically. And for example, in the all finance and a big part of the non-finance workforce is also being trained in AI, how to leverage data analytics, other digital tools under, let's say, an umbrella which we internally call Dan Skills. So Dan on Skills, we have an AI academy already in place. So we are getting ready in terms of how our people can use it. And then the other part that you need to do is, when people are having these capabilities, you need to have agile and cross functional teams, because then they speak to each other and then it starts really working. And on top of that, you can put people together. Then how do they work? So then you give them the right culture, the culture being again of the same constructively dissatisfied, together with accountability, and of course the overarching growth mindset with the right overarching KPIs clear, so that we all move in that direction. And then it goes, in the end, all of this works with the right level of change management and adoption. So there has to be in the culture embedded continuous learning and adaptability to new technologies, and helping people get over that curve, because change is not easy. So it takes time, it takes patience, but with these four elements, the process really starts to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, just and a quick follow up there, Sidra. I hear so much about the cross functional element. How are you putting it in place in practice?
So normally we work with a very non-siloed approach, and everything that we do from forecasting to margin management is very much co-built. And you will also see that, for example, we had a capital market event in 2024. I invite you to have a look. Is You will see how different parts of the leadership team have an equal voice. So it really starts from the top, that everyone has the same collective mandate and is bringing, the same culture of leading, with example, and being very performance driven. So really, everyone knows how they play the game as part of the overall mandate, and this is how we cascade it down in the organization.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Matthew, I want to get your views on how finance leaders can close the skills gap, right? There's so much more to learn. It's a completely different mindset for your traditional finance executive. How are you building that cross functional capability, building on what Sidras just said?
And we talked a bit about AI. I'm often told that what you really need is a couple of young graduates, and they'll be like a panacea that come in, and they're whiz kids on everything. But I think, if anything, it's a good reminder of how important diversity is in the team. Diversity of thinking, of experience. Very, very important. So I think that is one of our main focuses, and one of our main tools is around mobility. So we push quite hard on mobility, that's how people move not only within the finance departments, they just don't become siloed and vertical in their progression, but they get a real breadth of experience and they see how all the tendrils come together. And then likewise, then outside of finance. So it's now a bit more common that people move into the business, and people move from the business here, and we have interchange between finance departments and risk departments. So we really have pushed that mobility button quite hard. And I think that's where we've seen the most benefit. And it has lots of other benefits as well, right? You have quite an engaged workforce if they can see that there's a broader scope for where they might move with their careers. But I think it really does help people develop their skill sets if they go and try and test themselves in different environments with different people under different lenses, but they can always kind of correlate and come back to things that they've experienced before. And I think if you're going to be a senior executive, and if you're going to be a senior finance executive, you need to have a very broad understanding that how everything interplays together. And as we develop these finance leadership executives, I think that's what we're really looking for. But it's not everyone's going to become the CFO or minus one, right? You need that across the workforce, that capability, that mobility, that lack of being stagnant in your capability.
Yeah, that ties in quite nicely with what Johan said, is just as well about the finance executive role transforming so much, needing that broad view across the business. So it's great to hear that you're already redesigning those roles and allowing for that mobility across the business, Matthew. I want to move on to the sort of final segment of our discussion. In my opinion, perhaps the most important, defining the return on investment. Firms around the world are investing in technology and AI, a lot of them to experiment with it and slowly scale it up as well. But I think continued spend will really determining that return on investment. So Johan, I'd like to come to you first about the broad framework or approach to this thinking around ROI from tech investments, maybe even enterprise-wide.
Yes, I think there are a couple of things. First of all, I think there's a belief, a vision that the ROI will be there, and a lot of people are willing to kind of take that bet and see what the value is that we can unlock here. And I think that's the right thing to do, by the way. And I think so. There's one kind of strand of it, one channel of it, if you will, that is more on the belief that this is the right thing, that's the future, and that's what most companies are doing right now. And that we kind of get that, and we will see what we can find in that way out of that. I think in other ways we're starting if we go back on the kind of smaller language models or chatbots or automation of specific flows or AI kind of enhanced, augmented analytics in various kind of tasks, if you will, or for specific purposes that we've discussed here. There you're starting to see more ROI. It could be, for example, that the amount of hours saved that you have unlocked with this that the company can save. And I mean, if you're a growing company, then that's quite a easy thing to kind of say that, okay, then we need to have less people than in these certain areas as we grow. If you don't, and if you're going to realize those savings, of course, it is a matter of efficiencies then, and that depends on where companies are and how willing they have been able to do that. I still think people are quite hesitant at the moment to kind of take the full kind of bets on AI being up and running fully yet. So I think we're in its kind of beginning phase still on how much kind of return on investment is actually materializing. But I think it is something we as finance people need to step into much more, engaging in this and starting to challenge more, which is a key part of our function as well, to ask these questions, to really push what is the ROI? Are we doing this because it's just cool? What are we actually going to get out of it? Is it efficiency in terms of cost, or kind of what you're alluding to earlier, Melanie, as well? The real efficiency is not necessarily around cost. The real efficiency is making better decisions fully and really kind of unlocking new ways of doing things and do like better operational decision. That will always be much more powerful than quote unquote only saving cost. So two kind of tracks. Finance play a huge role in, I think, fine-tuning, defining, and lifting that conversation of what is the return on investment, because companies are spending quite a lot right now.
Yeah, thank you for your honesty there, Johan. I think no one's got it nailed down, and I think it's an evolving conversation. So great to hear your perspective. Matthew, what are you thinking about? What's your approach to measuring ROI?
So we take a portfolio approach when it comes to technology. And I think, we're not planning on changing our approach with regards to AI specifically. So I think the approach to ROI and where you spend and choose not to spend, to me, is still the same. It's not the first time that we're dealing with new and untested technologies. It's labeled AI, but really it's a new technology, and that's not the first time. I remember when internet banking was the end of banks, and banks adopted internet banking, and now it's just normal that internet banking is a channel by which you interact with your bank. But that's because everyone jumped to it and modernized. And I think it's that focus on modernizing that's really important. We try to stick to our strategy. So our strategy is customer simplicity and growth. So everything goes through the strategy lens first and foremost, as opposed to a mathematical ROI lens. So is it good for the customer? Does it make things more simple? Does it help us grow? And that's how we channel our investment. And then overall, because I know when the audience and myself will be often interested in the mathematics around it, as we go back to our conversation before about the financial planning and the modeling, we set a very consistent kind of portfolio level of investment year after year. And the decisions within there come into the prioritization each year. So it's important. We do have a really good prioritization of framework, deciding what to spend things on within that framework. We look at how that helps us develop our cost efficiency ratio. As a company, through the years, we have our range that we want to operate in through the cycle and versus competition. And so if the ROI, we build back to trying to get to that cost efficiency ratio, because within the overall portfolio spend, you will have things that sustain your current revenue levels, i.e., if you don't do it, customers will go somewhere else. So there are protective things that, these are in the modernization space. And Johan's here from the motor vehicle industry, so I'm sure cars have come a long way over the years. You have to modernize to stay in business. And it's the same in banking. We have to modernize our platforms. So some of the stuff we do has a very clear thing. You develop a new capability. And so we will be able to do something we didn't do before, and we'll be able to identify how much of the market we think we'll capture, and you get a very nice mathematical ROI, or we'll be able to scale and volume up accordingly because we're constrained, and we'll get that, and that will help us. Then there will be spaces, particularly in the try and test area, and particularly AI, where it'll be very much kind of like we want to do we want to find out, and it's okay if not everything you do on the technology investment deliver something, but we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. So we kind of limit how much goes into that space.
That's a valuable perspective as well. Just that, of course, with some projects, you would want to establish, a way of determining ROI, but you also have to allow yourself to experiment without the shackles of ROI in some cases. Alex, I'd like your thoughts on ROI as well. You work with so many different types of organizations. What are you hearing, and what is your perspective on that in terms of the timeline of these returns? Are there some short-term, low-hanging fruit, perhaps like efficiency and cost savings, but are there other returns that will take longer to materialize, perhaps sales growth and product innovation, for instance? Be great to get your thoughts there.
Yeah. So really like the point that Johan made earlier on that personal productivity. So of course AI can also be in the form of Copilot, and I think one of those examples is helping the workforce write emails faster than might be spending time on, which is not maybe the most productive. So I think that's probably quite difficult to quantify such. But from the perspective that I quite often look at this is when positioning our platform, which does support in budgeting and planning process and consolidation, and also has got lots of AI capabilities on the outset of a project. To just give you some tangible metrics, is that we speak to our customers and we try to identify what's their process cycle time. So if they are doing a budget process, and I think also as Johan was mentioning, that bottom-up process across the different markets, how long does that take? When does it start? What needs to be done? Data needs to be loaded, cleansed, mapped, processed. So that's something where we look at the initial process cycle time, and then we also look at what the achieved process cycle time could be by adopting new technology. And from that, you can also derive a return on investment when you then kind of free up that resource. I think that's something that we see more on the short-term scale, which is quite easily measurable. And then when we look at maybe mid-term effects, and maybe pivoting towards that AI capability, forecast accuracy is maybe also something that can be translated into the return of investment, because there's a cost to AI. That's the implementation cost, and that's also the cost of running a technology. And with the forecast accuracy and then potential cost savings, so if that's maybe a optimization of stock levels depending on industry, maybe for the known, or if that's maybe a reduction in cost, like an energy cost, that can be directly measured as a return on investment, and you can then identify how quickly that investment will return itself. Then I think more to Matthew's point, and that's more difficult for us to measure as an organization, is that strategic impact, so time to decision. So how does all this technology help you to actually make faster decisions? And that's something where I would say that's more a metric where we would have to look more on the long-term scale.
Wonderful, Alex. So thank you for breaking that down as well. So freeing up resources in the short term, in the midterm, forecast accuracy, and long term, the efficiency around decision making, or enhanced ability around decision making. Wonderful points there, and I'm sure has given our audience a lot to think about. Sidra, I want to come to you with perhaps the most contentious part of the AI discussion around AI investments in the context of the workforce. How are you thinking about that? Are you prioritizing AI investments over hiring?
So I think where we are currently is we are upskilling all our workforce and reskilling them with a focus on digital, AI, and other high priority skills like sustainability. And we really take it seriously because we have a global training initiative under which we have a partnership with Microsoft to deliver the right AI and digital training at the scale that the organization needs today. There are structured programs behind it, and it's really the encouragement is coming from the top to upskill and reskill everyone who's, let's say, eligible and relevant to this upskilling. So, what we focus on in terms of human capital is to have high value, judgment based upskilling. And this is where we are really leveraging AI at the moment. While having said that before, and we touched upon it, AI is right now much more on planning and forecasting, and how we can make the quality of the work done reassessed and done differently. So people are really, let's say, benefiting from the upskilling that is currently ongoing with this new dimension coming through for all of us.
Sure. I think that circles back to the point you made earlier about creating the right enabling environment as well to ensure that the technology adoption is successful. We're coming to the final few minutes of our session here today, and I do want to go around the room for a final question to all of our panelists, asking them about what that priority is for the year ahead in terms of managing the uncertainty, and even potentially what's the element you think will be most challenging. I'll open up the floor for any of you to go first, but happy for any one of you to raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to call on someone now. Johan.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I mean, from an industry point of view, we have this transition, as I mentioned, electrification. We have the geopolitics, the tariffs. I'm not going to repeat myself fully on that, but that kind of is what we're navigating through, and we're also excited about the opportunities there as well. To be completely honest, electrification is still a growing segment, and then we're going to capitalize on that. So, but managing that whole volatile environment, number one, probably. If I take it down a bit more to finance, to kind of the finance profession and the finance teams and so on, I think it is really, I mean, getting really the hang of a number of things that we talked about here today. If I may even start with, you have to ask yourself, what's the purpose with finance even? What's the purpose of our functions? And in my opinion, what we are here to do is to really make sure that the companies are taking better decisions, to improve decision-making quality. And how do we do that? That is becoming really three things. First of all, I think it's an outside-in perspective. Many companies in general, in many industries, are very internally focused. That outside-in perspective that we get from looking cross industry, cross functions, cross silos is hugely important. Second of all, it's the business partnering, where finance is that decision maker or informing the decision makers, is influencing it and looking at the risks and all the other aspect that we kind of discussed today when it comes to what parameters, what factors, what scenarios do we need to consider here. And the final one is really to the point about data. Finance profession is to do these informed decision making based on data and facts, and that is where I think we're going to focus a lot in the finance team to get better at that, harmonizing more. We talked about data quality today, and I think that's a journey that we need to keep doing, improving our planning processes, improving our data quality. How do we utilize AI in the best way, as we've discussed? So I think keep going on that journey to kind of harmonize the tool of the data together with the context and the experience of the influential finance people. I think that's going to be the main focus for the next year and beyond in the finance team.
Wonderful. Thank you, Johan. Matthew.
My one thing is prioritization. So I think that's what we've been trying to work on a lot this year. Your first question to me was where I gave a laundry list of risks of things that one could focus on, and I only scratched the surface of the long laundry list. But so all these things going on, all distractions. How do you prioritize? So I think that prioritize, and I always call it the reprioritization mechanism, because you're prioritizing, then you're reprioritizing. I think that's how you adapt through the uncertainty. You have your prioritization mechanism, and you're able to reprioritize through it. So trying to do a lot more of working on the clarity piece first that underpins that. What are the priorities, and how are we going to reprioritize, and how do we get the communication going? So one of the questions I'm always asking my team is, after I've reiterated the priorities, asking them what's knocking you off track from staying on those priorities. And it's the same conversation with business stakeholders across the organization as well. So if I had to pick one thing, and it's good to have one priority, it would be prioritization.
Thank you, Matthew. Sidra.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Melanie. So, if I would say one thing, the way the role of finance and the leadership of finance is evolving, I think we are becoming very much close to the driving seat, very close to the CEO, and it has been happening over many years now. And if I was to give you one, let's say, view from my side, is obsession with business. This is what you need to be doing as a finance professional. So it's great to deliver a beautiful forecast, etc. But you really need to be obsessed with the business. What are you doing today, and what will you do in 3 months and 1 year? That will move the needle for the business that you are a part of. And this is, if this is, this is the compass that we finance professionals, no matter what kind of specialisms we take, we really can make a very big impact. We already make a very big impact, as you see in many large organizations. Now the CEO CFO role is becoming interchangeable, and this is quite a signal that this is where the future of finance leadership is heading. So this is what I would leave with everyone here, is absolute obsession with business.
Yeah, we've talked a great deal today about the evolution of that role. So thank you for touching on that. Alex, for the final word.
Yeah, so I think from my perspective out of the IT sector, it's really that innovation and for us to stay on top of that. And I think from a financial perspective, that's that constant R&D spend, and the way that we kind of approach that is not by copying the competition, but listening to our customer base. And I think especially around the AI topics that we're talking, is coming up with useful use cases that help finance leaders make useful decisions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all of your insights. I think we've had a fascinating discussion here today. I think setting the scene with all of the laundry list of risks, as Matthew described it. There are innumerable risks facing the business today, facing our finance leaders today, and adapting to all of those and building that agility within the team, within the finance function, is absolutely imperative. It requires the right kinds of tools and approaches. We heard so much about scenario planning and about dynamic forecasting, but also about preparing your team. So ensuring that they are upskilled, ensuring that there's a lot of cross-functional collaboration that takes place, so that finance executives today understand the business, as Sidra said, have an obsession with the business, so that they can then deliver as senior finance executives for the business. We had a great discussion on ROI, which I think is top of mind for a lot of finance executives as well. We're in early days and we need to recognize that, measure what we can, but allow room for experimentation. And I think, again, this is going to be a space that evolves rapidly. So thank you so much once again to all of our speakers for sharing their experience, sharing their views on such what is a difficult topic. And thank you to our audience today for joining us. Thank you to Wolters Kluwer for making this event possible. Wishing everyone a wonderful rest of the day.